kidnapping of the Lunik. In the early 1960s, the race to space between the US and the Soviet Union was at its peak. Both countries wanted to be the first to explore outer space, and to have the upper hand, the CIA came up with a kidnapping scheme. The target? A Soviet satellite. The CIA led a highway robbery-like mission where undercover agents convinced a truck driver carrying the satellite to take a break mid-route and give them access to the satellite. According to the declassified reports, the CIA agents borrowed the Soviet orbiter, took it apart to take pictures of every component, and put it back on the truck. This happened after the Soviets launched a multinational exhibit of their Lunik satellite and made it clear that they were ahead of the US in the race. Apparently, the Soviets had no idea that their truck driver was compromised and that the US had photographed the internals of their satellite. Unfortunately, the satellite was just a production item from which the engine and most of the electrical components had been removed. The examination only gave the CIA and NASA some measurements and structural characteristics, which weren't enough. Moreover, the Soviet Union also won the race on the 12th of April 1961 when they sent Yuri Gagarin to space, making this kidnapping mission a failure. Alan Shepard, the US astronaut, would not go to space on the Freedom 7 capsule until the 5th of May 1961. My Lai Massacre. In March 1968, several American soldiers carried out an operation in the South Vietnamese hamlet of My Lai, leading to the deaths of at least 300 Vietnamese citizens. The victims included children, women, and elderly people, making it one of the most horrifying acts by the American military. For an entire year, the US military covered up the massacre successfully. However, in November 1969, a journalist from the Associated Press investigated the operation, revealing the heart-wrenching truth about what the US soldiers had done. The news reports by the AP journalist made headlines, leading to an official inquiry into the events. The inquiry was concluded in March 1970, and criminal charges were brought against 14 US Army officers. All but one of the officers were deemed not guilty, according to the declassified documents. Soon afterward, the Pentagon established the Vietnam War Crimes Working Group, a task force aimed to investigate horrendous crimes such as the My Lai killings. Over 9,000 pages of documents were compiled by the task force, with each page detailing the numerous crimes committed by US troops during the Vietnamese War. The US troops had gang-raped Vietnamese women, mutilated their bodies, and even raped children. When these documents were declassified, the criminal acts committed by American soldiers were so horrendous that it became the largest reported civilian massacre of the 20th century. Iran Flight 655. Over the years, American agencies have led several other missions that ended up being completely useless, and Iran Flight 655 is one of the most gruesome mistakes the US Navy made. In 1988, a US warship shot down an Iranian civil aircraft in the Persian Gulf. The plane was en route to Dubai and had 290 people on board. The US Navy incorrectly identified the plane as an Iranian fighter jet and launched a missile to take it down. The declassified documents exposed this grave mistake that led to the deaths of 290 innocent people. 8 years later, in 1996, the US and Iranian governments settled for $61.8 million that would be used to compensate the families who lost their loved ones. However, the US never apologized for this mistake. To make matters worse, the declassified documents detailing the Pentagon investigations showed that the naval officers who misidentified the aircraft and shot it down were not at fault. The Department of Defense also conducted an investigation, which revealed that the official report and the later accounts of the incident were entirely different statements. Some of the major discrepancies found included the route of the flight, which was originally said to be deviated from the standard route. It was later found that the route was never changed. Similarly, the original report stated that the US warship was operating in international waters when the missile was launched. However, in reality, the warship was operating in Iranian territorial waters. Project Azorian. Project Azorian was another absurd operation by the CIA aimed at retrieving the remains of the Soviet Gulf-class ballistic missile submarine K-129. The submarine sunk in the North Pacific while on patrol, and according to reports, it rested 3 miles below the water on the seafloor. Both the CIA and the Department of Defense believed that if they could retrieve the submarine's remains, they could get their hands on codebooks, cryptographic gear, and much more. However, there was one major issue. The Soviets regularly guarded the area with patrol boats because they didn't want the Americans to snoop around the wreck. Despite that, the CIA was ordered by Henry Kissinger to work with Howard Hughes and set up a false flag deep seas mining mission. The mission was to make the Soviets believe that they were constructing a purpose-built ship called the USNS Hughes Glomar Explorer. On its face, it seemed like a deep sea mining vessel, but concealed inside it was a giant claw that was to be lowered down into the sea, grab the wreck, and get brought back to the surface. According to some reports, the CIA did grab the wreck. However, the claw malfunctioned on its way back, and a portion of the wrecked hull fell back down. What What little was discovered and brought back to land has never been officially revealed to the public. A few sources claim that the front part of the hull was recovered, and with that, 2 intact nuclear torpedoes and the sonar dome were also in custody of the CIA. As for the nuclear codes and the cryptographic gear, they were lost with the part of the hull that fell due to the claw malfunction. The claw malfunctioning itself is a point of debate. Many argue that it was just a cover-up, and the Americans recovered everything. Operation Northwoods. During the 1960s, tensions between the US government and Fidel Castro, the leader of Cuba, increased significantly. The Cold War led to the CIA to draw up several bizarre schemes to take down Castro, most of which were aimed at eliminating him. However, one of the most absurd covert operations was Operation Northwoods, an elaborate secret mission aimed at committing acts of violence deliberately against US and Cuban civilians and blaming them on the Cuban government to justify a war against Cuba. When these documents were declassified in 1998, they revealed that the Joint Chiefs of Staff came up with several plans in 1962 and suggested committing acts of violence, such as fake terrorist attacks in U.S. cities, hijacking planes, and attacking ships full of Cuban immigrants en route to the U.S. The Kennedy administration rejected the plans, calling them foolish. The plans were risky and could have led to a full-scale war with the Soviet Union. Following this, JFK also removed Lemnitzer from the position of chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. However, he moved on to become the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO in January 1963. FLIR, GIMBAL, and GOFAST UFOs. In 2017, the 3 classified videos of the U.S. Navy showing unidentified aircraft roaming around in impossible ways were leaked to the press. The videos, codenamed FLIR, GIMBAL, and GOFAST, were captured by Navy pilots on different missions in 2004, 2014, and 2015. They showed a wingless aircraft moving at hypersonic speeds with no visible means of propulsion. The videos sparked controversy and debates across the nation, with many asking questions about what the government and CIA were hiding from the public. Finally, in 2019, Pentagon officials admitted that the videos were not fake and stated that they were part of a larger issue. The sightings of UFOs increased near the U.S. military bases, according to a report by The Times. Yet, the U.S. government officials, the CIA, and the Navy did not talk about the UFOs or the videos further. The sightings, although seemingly real, still remain a mystery because nobody else has ever seen a UFO in real life. Nevertheless, the declassified documents indicate that the U.S. might have more information than they have revealed. Acoustic Kitty. The 1967 report from the CIA regarding a spy cat is one of the craziest CIA operations of all time. A memo titled "Views of Trained Cats" detailed the CIA's intention of using cats as spies and releasing them into the Soviet embassy to wander around and secretly hear sensitive information. The plan was to surgically implant microphones and transmitters into cats and use them as walking bugs. Despite the obvious risks, the CIA officials found that cats could be trained to move short distances. Building on that, the agency released its first spy cat in a park, giving it orders to eavesdrop on 2 men on a bench. Unfortunately, the cat was quickly run over by a car, making the test an utter failure. Soon afterward, the CIA researchers concluded that the security factors and environmental factors were risky, and that using cats in an actual foreign situation would not be practical. Therefore, Operation Acoustic Kitty was dropped entirely after $20 million were spent on this useless experiment. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord. Link in the description.